What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of the Bearded Rationals. We are super glad to have you here. Waylon is making a crazy face. Or he's frozen on it. I can't quite tell. Today's episode, we've got Jason Society with us. We're talking drug reforms. We're talking how the current system that we use to deal with drugs, i.e. the drug war, our current prison system and all these things lead to some pretty negative outcomes, both on a wider scale and certainly anecdotally. So I guess as per usual, we'll go through our round of intros, and we'll end with Jason Society, so we can we'll use his intro to kind of bridge into the conversation. So Waylon, if you want to go ahead and.
All right, hey, what's up, guys? My name is Waylon. Anybody who's tuning in maybe knows that by now, hopefully. Go by MK Ultra 7 on Twitch. I play guitar in a band called the Technicolor Nightmare. You check us out on Facebook, Instagram. As far as my intro, how I feel about this thing, I got to be totally upfront right off the jump here and say I'm full on for decriminalization of everything.
Okay.
So,
Blizzard
publicly, I don't care.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Blizzard81. You can find me on Twitch, Blizzard81, YouTube, Blizzard81, and in the Twitch politics community, shit posting in the chat for the most part. On this subject, I think I really don't know a whole lot about the stances on this subject, so I'm really interested in learning in this episode personally.
Cool.
That's about all I got.
And as far as my general take on it goes, probably if you've heard me, this is one of the things that I've tried to kind of hark on a little bit, even when I'm going into other shows that aren't necessarily about this. So my stance is probably going to be very similar to, I would imagine Waylon and Jason. So I'm probably going to take more of a question direction approach this episode. But yeah, Jason, if you want to go ahead and give your.
Oh, yeah, sure. So my take on drug policy right now is that we've seen currently the preponderance of our prison population is nonviolent drug offenders. We're seeing that the current drug laws actually disenfranchise and hurt the meekest among us the most, while those who are advantaged tend to get off on a lot of things, get off on their drug charges, don't necessarily face the same consequences. As a result, the drug war is an inept failure. It's inherently bad for society. It's bad for the poorest among us. And I do agree that at full decriminalization across the board for all drugs, regulating, taxing, and then the only place I think I would criminalize is probably people who were continuing to sell on the black market. And that more has to do with the fact that there's going to be a lack of quality control. There is going to be the possibility of people getting sick and hurt off of, the drugs made available to them. And like I said before, I think that a lot of it boils down to this drug war that has gone on for so long. I don't even like using the term because it's just, it's another way to institutionalize prejudice towards poor people and people of color. And I think really what it is it's institutionalized discrimination. But I think doing away with the drug war and decriminalizing it's going to open up a lot of avenues and opportunities for people. I think we'll see decreased drug use, like they said in Portugal. Once they made all drugs legal, they succeeded in making drugs boring for the youth. So there is a smaller youth population using drugs as well. More illicit drugs, and they were able to regulate and help those who wanted to get out of, their drug addiction as it stood without having to worry about the criminalization or the stigma factor that goes along with it. I think we should follow suit.
Awesome. And I mean, I guess as a general, if you want to just give kind of who you are, I'll give you more of a chance to do your outro and all those. But if you want to let people know who you are and what you do.
Sure. And again, I'm Jason Society. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Jason_society. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Society, no underscore. And you can find me on, well, I'm on YouTube, but you'll just have to look up Jason Society because I am not cool enough to have a fancy vanity link yet. So, but I am on there as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, like, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm just slowly bringing on, like, you know, my personal friends on the platform, like the people that I talk to anyways. So that's slowly the so like so far we've had 2 out of, you know, I'm a member of the B Squad, and then we've had 2 other members on. So it's just a matter of time before we get the bald man on to you know, lecture everybody on fascism or something.
Yep. Good old E.
So I guess as like a good place to start this, I think that one of the things that's interesting in this topic is that when you're talking about just about any issue facing America today, so much of the issue is connecting that issue with somebody else who that issue doesn't matter, like they don't have to deal with, right? And I think that this is one of the interesting cases where just about everybody has some very unfortunate anecdote when it comes to drugs. So I guess maybe not. I think I would rather start it from this kind of heavy place, and then we'll go up from here. But I would kind of like to go around and get, like, you know, maybe a personal anecdote from each of you on how drugs have, like, negatively impacted your life, or how you think that, you know, a reform could have made that better, or whatever. And we'll go in the opposite direction this time. So we'll start Jason Society.
Sure. You know, I spent a lot of time playing music and had several opportunities to, you know, hopefully fulfill, you know, some dream of major success. One of the biggest stories that I tell that I haven't talked about a whole lot was that, at least not on stream, is that my band was actually doing pretty well and we were gaining a lot of steam. However, there was a sheriff in our locality, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and a collection of state senators that were pushing a law called SB 1070, which was a very damaging law for people coming into the country, for immigrants coming into the country, you know, not necessarily through the legal pathways, but maybe some of those were refugees or people that were asylum seekers, and he basically, like, wanted to make their lives hell. The whole bill actually got one of the state senators, Russell Pierce, extracted from office. They recalled him over the bill. But essentially, we went and did a show where we were protesting this guy, and within about a month, we were put on a gang list for all of Maricopa County. And anybody that saw our band stickers or anything like that, we were getting pulled over. Naturally, they knew, you know, being in a band, we smoked weed and stuff. And they wrapped us all up in about, within a week and a half of each other, all of us had marijuana violations and were facing court. Some of us had more than others, and we're facing some jail time or had repeat offenses. We were on our way to signing a deal with Al Jorgensen's record label at the time. And once that happened, everything fell to shit. Everybody was in trouble with the law. We were so wrapped up. And I mean, we're musicians. We're poor. You know, we were trying to just pay for our fucking guitar strings and shit. You know, like, you don't make a lot of money playing shows, you know, on that entry level. You're hustling for every dime you have. And really it basically fucking destroyed us. You know, we had to go back and try to rebuild. You know, it took a couple of years, and even at that point we just never got back to that place. And that's a small example. That's a base example of I don't even think what we went through is horrible in comparison to what a lot of people go through. But it was enough to derail what was to be our career, you know, collectively.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, one of the reasons that I came to be such a huge proponent of changing these laws is I didn't just see that with me. I saw that with other people too. I saw that with people that ended up, friends of mine that ended up ODing because they got what is commonly known as like hot doses of like heroin, shit like that, where they didn't make it, you know. And that started to become par for the course, and I started realizing, it's not just about decriminalizing for the sake of keeping people out of jail. Like, this is a means to save people's lives, because right now we're not doing that. People flounder and die all the time on these drugs because they're cut with shit. I mean, we ended up with weird ass shit like crocodile because of the lack of being able to regulate and relay proper drugs to people, as opposed to hoping that it'll just work itself out, or survival of the fittest, So I don't know. That's kind of my shitty spiel about drugs and the direct effect it's had on me, at least. How the justice system has negatively impacted that.
Okay, yeah. So actually, I think that's a good. So you mentioned there, you like kind of had an aside where you're like, I know that's not as that like there are more horrible stories, but I think it's worth noting that like this is such a broad encompassing thing, and there's a spectrum of the way that this destroys lives. So yeah, like I wouldn't even say that like it's less horrible than somebody like ODing and dying, right?
Right.
But like as far as like a personal anecdote, I mean that could easily be the most impactful horrible thing that like some stupid drug crime did to you. So like yeah, I don't think that's that outrageous or anything.
This is like it's easy. Okay, so for us as musicians, Jason, it's easy for us to say to normal people like it probably doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but like, dude, that's like crushing your dreams. You know what I mean? That's not at all not a severe thing. You know what I mean?
For sure.
That's a big deal for sure. I mean, I've dealt with all kinds of shit too, as being a musician, and I know how bad that would hurt.
So I guess hi cat. I guess moving into Waylon while I move this cat.
All right. So me personally, man, I'll just be candid and say that I've had my own struggles, when I was younger, probably, 7-8 years ago, had my own struggles with drug addiction, and have been down that line where, I was homeless, living in a truck, squatting in houses, just not living the best way I could have. And I told a pretty good story last night about it. But yeah, it's affected me personally. It's affected people I care about. I've had friends that have come close to it. I've not had any of my really close personal friends die from it yet, but I've seen some pretty scary shit over the years. I've had my own close calls with doing like some really hardcore shit, like Opanas, for instance, and a time that I passed out in my yard face down, and had I not been face down, who knows if I would have woken up, But yeah, I mean, if it was decriminalized, maybe there would be a little bit safer way to go about it. Like we were talking about yesterday, if it was decriminalized and you had to go to the same kind of establishment, and then you had some kind of a way that things were being tracked, kind of like how the Casper system works for prescription drugs now, and people's usage was being tracked, and it was known how much they were using, and they were in contact with people. Like I brought up the idea of needle exchanges, stuff like that. If something like that had been around then, and I was getting my stuff from the same place, somebody could have seen that what I was, because I had at that point in my time, at that point in my life, isolated myself from my family. My circle of friends was very small. It wasn't even, it was the people I was just doing drugs with all the time, and whoever else I ran into that did drugs. And I don't know, when I was doing them at that level, there was not really anybody around me who would be like, hey man, maybe you need to slow down, because we were all partying, we were all having a good time,
Right. And they feed that bias, right? They kind of feed that, it's like, oh, well, we're all doing it anyways. It's not that bad,
Right.
And maybe having that outside person seeing it and be like, hey, you've been here like, the past 4 days or whatever, like, what's up, Yeah,
man, you all right, bro? Like, yeah, it's a very complicated issue to talk about in so many different ways, and but decriminalization across the board would, like you were talking about, remove some of the stigma, remove some of the fun from kids, and I don't know, just having those checks and balances in place rather than just leaving it wide open to whatever kind of black market was going on. Like I could go and buy pills when I was 16, 17 years old on the black market.
Oh yeah,
that's not fucking good. We don't need that, fellas. Nobody needs to be doing the hard drugs at that age.
Well, yeah, and I mean that was definitely echoed in my younger years as well. I mean, we had access to any hard drug we could possibly want, and I mean, it was like mostly where I went to school. Most of those drug houses were literally right next to the school, and we had off campus lunch, so it was just like pop over to homeboy's house, you know, pick up whatever you're gonna pick up, and that's what it is, you know. No, you know, it's just kind of like set up that way. So, yeah, I feel that, you know, like it almost seems like if it were, you know, regulated better and you had to go through like facilities to get it, even if, you know, we know that there's going to be leaks. And that's the one argument that I hate that'll come up is, oh, well, you know, somebody could just go get it for somebody else, or, you know, it's still going to be out there. Well, yeah, but you know, you're limiting the risk factor. We can't, we're never going to be able to completely do away with it, but we can limit the risk factor. And I think that's what you get through that. You know, you get a system where at least we're limiting it. And then if kids have less access versus,
well, I think that's the whole discussion, right? It's just when it comes to drugs in general, the entire discussion is around harm reduction. You can't ever take away all of the risk, but you can reduce the amount of harm that's being done to people.
Right? Yeah.
I mean,
because
oh,
go ahead.
I guess we'll go ahead and we'll let Blizzard get his intro out, and then we'll go a little more into the open discussion. But I could already tell it's going to be a good episode. There's going to be. I think that there's a real interesting discussion to be had about like those leaks and how to, like, maybe even potentially like how to argue for those leaks not being the deal that people are going to make of them. So, but Blizza, I think, is probably the only one who's going to have some pushback to that. So I'd like to go ahead and let him get his piece out if you want to, Blizza.
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, I may have a little bit of pushback, but I don't think that I'll do that in the opening here. I think, well, to be in the spirit of open and honest, I myself am a cannabis connoisseur, so right there, legalization of marijuana is a non-issue. It should be done. It should have been done. Like, this is just where we are now. And in my own personal experience, well, like you said, Tenflix, I think that the drug war and drugs as a whole affects everybody in every walk of life, all across the board, no matter what. In some way, someone is affected by it. And in my personal experience, it seemed to be in my younger years in high school, like harkening back to what MK and Jason were talking about. I'm born and raised in Chicago, and it might surprise some people to find out that the opioid crisis actually affected my life more anecdotally, I guess, than the gun issues. I've had probably a dozen high school friends of mine that did OD and did pass away. Even back then, when 16, 15, 17 years old, you know. So I think that's where a little bit of my pushback is going to come from, because I have lost so much already. But I'm really interested in hearing, like you said, the point is to save people. The point is to make people better and to make people healthier. So I'm really interested in going down those roads more than I am in pushing back.
yeah, I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have. But it's like, don't those two kind of go hand in hand though? Like you were talking about, you know, gun violence and stuff like that, and like just having this. I think those two feed each other in a lot of ways. Like I was talking about yesterday, like the recidivism and the being branded a felon after you've got a drug charge, and then not being able to find a good job, and then looking at supplementing your living by dealing drugs, and then fucking getting into doing drugs, and then it just keeps on feeding into itself. And like, I think neither one of them would be as big of an issue without the other in a lot of ways. I know that's kind of unrelated to the fact that, you know, you've had friends that died of overdoses, but like, if there wasn't such a black market and it wasn't just fucking everywhere because there's a huge amount of competition in it, you know what I mean? Would that have limited that, you think?
See, I'm not sure if the gun violence is extremely related to the drugs. I think it's more related the gangs, but it's just still the same age group. You know what I mean? The 14 through 18. Those are the you know, the key demographic that are pushing these numbers so high right now. I mean, obviously, anytime you're dealing with any black market and anything that's worth millions of dollars on the street, there's going to be guns involved, and you know, intricately connected with the violence. So yeah. I mean, there are connections, but I'm not sure if that accounts for a majority of the violence. I'd say, you know what I mean.
So if we're moving into like open discussion now, is that what we're doing, Caleb?
Mhm. Yeah.
So looking at, like, I know that we normally would like to save, Q&A stuff for the last 30 minutes, but Jay Freak brings up an interesting point here in the chat. He says, it seems like everyone is thinking or reminiscing that drugs aren't great for kids, and the panel has dealt with addictions and the pain and suffering it has caused, but still want less regulations than we have. How can you parse the seeming contention? Well, the thing is, we don't want less regulation. We want more regulation, but we want common sense regulation that makes sense. Like with the way it is right now, where you just put a blanket on everything and say that everything's outlawed. And I mean, I guess you could live in some kind of a denial of the fact that it just runs wild and nobody does shit about it. But it's less regulated now than it would be if the things were legal and there had to be, you know, reputable stores and companies and regulations into how these things were distributed and tracking who they were distributed to, how often, and what amounts, and blah 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 blah.
Or even
And
up to
was,
treatment. Like, it's not just like our arguments don't begin and end at legalization. Usually, like, one of the things that we kind of touched in on our pre-chat yesterday was that, like, the level of like what it means to be a rehab and the variance between one rehab to another being so huge that like people are priced out of legitimate treatment options, and then some people are priced into less legitimate treatment options. So there are people at the really high end who are paying for a rehab, but it's a spa experience. It's not like
vacation more than anything.
So like I think that like probably having a baseline there, but yeah, you nailed it on the head, is that it's not actually less regulations. It's just that the area that we're focusing the regulations now isn't working. And it seems honestly like this almost sounds maybe even childish, but it almost seems like if for no other reason than to attempt another thing than what we're doing, because it's clearly not the case, like, or clearly not the solution.
Yeah. What we're doing now is not working. Obviously, it's like, we're talking about high school kids getting a hold of drugs. Like, if I know that high school kids will find ways to get alcohol sometimes, but I don't think that's nearly as commonplace now as it was even, 20 years ago, as regulations have tightened up and people have started taking things like this more seriously. So imagine if you applied the same thing, like, because dude, when you're in high school, if weed is illegal where you're at and all these other drugs are illegal, you go over to your dealer's house to buy some fucking weed, and the chances that, somebody dabbles in some other shit as well, and that's somehow going to come up into your availability and you're going to have the opportunity to acquire that when you're a minor, is way fucking higher when things are blacklisted like that. I think, in my opinion, this has been my anecdotal experience. I'm not a fucking expert. I'm not a lawmaker, but what I can say is
they definitely. I mean, they've got a vested interest in controlling as much as the market as they could, right? So like if you're selling the one illegal thing, like, I understand that the charge between like weed and like a pill in most states are like vastly different things, but for most people, like if you're slinging weight and you're already doing like felonious shit, it seems like most people would like to control more of the market rather than less, regardless of like what the drug is. You don't find a whole lot of like morally sound dealers.
Oh yeah, and you want people that are going to keep coming back. So why aren't you going to try to get them onto the next best thing, or the thing that they're going to get hooked on? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah,
they're not out.
Most.
Yeah, they're not out to like make friends. They're out to sell drugs. And I know that I had, like I say, I didn't have friends that sold drugs, or whatever, that weren't like cool people, but I know that the people that they bought drugs from weren't always cool people, and I knew that they had some shit going on, and they were trying to like, run an angle. They wanted them to buy like the other shit. They wanted them to buy like, coke and whatever else they could get them into, because they knew that was more profitable than just selling them weed. So I've always said, like, I always get mad when people are like, oh, you know, weed's a gateway drug. And it's always like, no, weed isn't the gateway drug. The black market is the gateway drug. The fact that you have to go to people that are, you know, are selling illicit or illegal stuff means that naturally, like, they're going to try to get you into more illegal stuff most of the time, you know? So
Yeah.
like, I've never felt like it was like, you know, that whole weed gateway drug was ever even valid. I've always felt like, yeah, you know, take it out of the black market, then you don't have the issue anymore, you know? And it's the same with the rest of this stuff. You move it out of the black market and into a place where it can be controlled. And yeah, again, I am big time for regulation of these substances. One of the biggest things that I'm concerned about is quality control. I mean, half the people you hear ODing these days are ODing on drugs that are cut with fentanyl. Okay. Like, nobody wants.
They're not even ODing on the drug they're trying to buy.
Yeah. These guys didn't even want fentanyl, you know, like, and that's what's killing them.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing is that, like, to be clear, like, I don't think anybody here is making like an especially like libertarian argument about it. I think that, like, in any of the reforms that we were putting in, there would probably be, I mean, there's at least going to be a rule that to replace any one rule that gets taken out, if not a couple rules.
And that's like, okay, so that's something that, you know, it's a flashy, it's a hot thing to say, you know, decriminalize all drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That will elicit a response out of people who have had experience with it in the past and had these same kind of anecdotal, you know, horrible things happen to them, lost family members, lost friends, seen it affect their community, seen it affect their economy, seen it affect, I mean, that's something that's I brought up yesterday was like the taxpayer angle on it too, like paying these per diems for all the people that are being kept in jails and prisons that are, you know, in there for nonviolent drug charges. But I'm getting off on a tangent. My point is, when I say decriminalize all drugs, I mean decriminalize the use of drugs. I still think that without a license, some sort of a licensing system, without some sort of a regulatory body that inspects these things periodically for, you know, quality control, like Jason was saying, I still think that if you're operating outside of that, you should be treated like, I mean, a bootlegger, you know, like it's, that should be illegal. It should be illegal to deal drugs on an individual basis in this system that I'm talking about for the sake of protecting people.
Yeah, it's, and like, I really don't like the I don't know. I don't think that I think that, like, it probably does read to a lot of people as sort of like a this or that type thing. Like, you know, you're kind of like here, let me turn myself up just a bit more. It probably does sound like a thing that, like, you're sort of like trying to black and white, but I don't think that's what, like, I don't think that's what anybody, like, anytime I've ever actually heard this argument like fleshed out from somebody who has really, like, clearly thought about it, it's always with like a very, very steep level of regulation at basically every level. So yeah, that's, I don't know, I guess that's pretty much where I would end my point on that. But I'm trying to think of like how like I said, I think it would be interesting to explore the ways that you could, like, sell these things, or how you could argue these things to people who were, like, adamantly opposed. So from some level, do you think that I guess we'll just get like the baseline things. Do you guys think that incarceration, either how we have it or with a reformed incarceration, is something that could be beneficial for drug rehabilitation?
No. I think it stigmatizes it. I think you're going to end up, because especially if it ends up being a felony, now you've got to check the box when you go to an employer. So you lose job opportunities. And really, I think that isolation for people and lumping people into a prison or jail system, when what they need is like help, probably medical, psychological help, or just addiction help, or maybe they want to do the drugs and they're perfectly fine doing that. As long as, it's controlled like we're talking about, I wouldn't really see a reason for carceral remedies. Now, if it's somebody that's trafficking drugs illegally, like we were talking about, who isn't licensed and doesn't have their, you know, ducks in a row and isn't getting, you know, quality controlled on their product, then yeah, you know, I mean, a carceral solution may work for them, because that's a different thing. You know, they're actually breaking the law, they're skirting the rules, and the product that they are producing could potentially be lethal to somebody. So I think there's a difference there.
I think that's the way you have to look at it too, is like in that in that very specific situation where it's a dealing situation. It's just like with bartenders, man. Like we talked about this yesterday too. Bartenders have a responsibility to look out for the well-being of their patrons. And if they're not, there are legal repercussions for that. They can be charged for over-serving people. They can be held responsible for automobile accidents, for people that have been overserved at a bar. I mean, the same kind of thing needs to be looked at for all substances, and you're just creating a massive blind spot in the wall by not having that.
Okay, I'll let Blizzard respond and kind of get his opinion in there, but I do have something I want to say to like that general take. So Blizzard, if you want to go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Jason covered what I was going to say, which was that you know, the dealing of the drugs. I think rhetorically, I'm not sure if decriminalization is the same as legalization. I think we could you know, create a little bit of clarity in that aspect. But more than anything, I'd say that the rehabilitation would probably help the most with people that are committing other crimes, you know, in search of the drug. You know what I mean? So like if someone gets arrested for breaking into a car, then they obviously have to pay a punitive damage for that. But when they get out, instead of it just being an extension of the punitive system, it actually turns into a rehabilitative system on their exit.
And I think you have to give some credit to the legal system right now in that they are trying to implement some of these things in some of these drug courts and stuff like that, and opting first for rehab before they're opting for incarceration. I know that on our local level here, that's something that happens a lot. Is that for, you know, first and sometimes even second offenses, they will go toward trying to get you into a supervised rehabilitation program before they'll put you in jail. So, I mean, some ways our legal system is already waking up to this, that just throwing somebody in jail and labeling them a criminal and taking away their civil rights is not necessarily the best move to deal with a drug dependency issue.
I think the biggest conversation for me personally would be, you know, how you guys have been saying, like, legalize all drugs. And it's like, to me, it's like weed. Like I said, weed, obviously, there is no conversation to be had. It just should be legal, just like cigarettes, just like alcohol at this point. But when we get into the harder drugs, it turns grayer and grayer area as far as the way I see it. You know what I mean? Because I see the damage that it does. But I don't want to go down a sidetrack.
I think you just got to look at common sense regulations for them, like as the potential for, like, there should still be a scheduling system, I think. And as the potential for abuse and the potential for damage and the potential for lethality increases, so too should the regulation. But leaving them in the limbo they're in right now, where they're technically illegal but they're all over the place all the time, is akin to leaving them completely unregulated, because we can't act like them being illegal is destroying the market, or there's not a market there, because it's bigger than it ever has been. So
yeah.
That's kind of where my argument on that comes from, is that I don't see how it has to be better than what we're doing right now. It has to be.
So just out of curiosity, to kind of like as a devil's advocate position, let me this real quick so this goes away from Melissa. Would you say that this like logically follows for other forms of like addiction? So like, say that you've got like a legitimate kleptomaniac who like that's their rise comes from like stealing, right? And it's like the same addictive imbalance that like you would assume that most addictions are, right? Would you also be opposed to putting them in jail? Do you think that like their issue could not be solved by?
I think that for my opinion, if you're asking me directly, then I think that that is a mental health issue. But at the same time, it comes down to, how are you affecting other people's rights? If you're depriving other people of their property, then you're stepping on their rights. So I mean, it kind of becomes a little more punitive in that regard, in my opinion. I mean,
The question, to be clear, the question isn't, do you feel like incarceration is more justified? It's, do you think do you think it logically follows that for the same reasons incarceration is far less likely to actually do anything for this person as far as like rehabilitating the mental thing?
that's a very interesting question. I think incarceration in that case would be like a mitigating factor in keeping them from infringing on anybody else's rights, and then you would have to implement, you have to look at it as a mental health disorder, right? I mean, if we're saying kleptomania, that's a mental health disorder, so you have to look at it from that angle, and there has to be some kind of treatment involved in that, but they should be properly screened and diagnosed beforehand, and
Yeah.
there should be treatment involved in it, certainly, if it's coming from a mental health place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hypothetical. Not that I think that like kleptos are on the same level.
That's a damn interesting question for sure.
Well, I think what I would look at though, truly, and this is a little bit touched on a little bit by Waylon, but I think what you have to look at is it is a degree of like, what are they doing to somebody else effectively? Like, how are they inhibiting another person's rights? Like, let's say, okay, if somebody's a drug addict and their only crime is doing drugs and they're not committing other crimes, then to me, it's a nothing burger, do what you want, man. Like, now if that person is on drugs and they're off their shit and they're like stealing from people, or they're, assaulting people, or doing crazy shit, running out in the middle of traffic, shit like that, right. Well, I don't think they should get a break just because they're on drugs. That's one thing I'll say.
We already have laws for those things.
Yeah, and so you should get in just as much trouble.
It doesn't make much sense to criminalize the drugs themselves when all of the things that would result from doing the drugs that would possibly infringe on somebody else's rights are already illegal.
Yeah, I think this just to harken back on what I said earlier, I think that this is more of a post-trial or post-jail reform. You know what I mean? Because instead of our system just being, after release, is just an extension of the punitive system. You know what I mean? With your probation officers and your check-ins and your money. It's just basically a way to just take as much more from you as they can before they cut you loose. And so I think that actual reform in the post trial or post, release from jail or whatever would be the easiest way to see the quickest changes.
Yeah, I think you could do that. And that's something that was brought up yesterday. I do think that you could push people into like a rehabilitation type system, but again, like the biggest problem right now is that these facilities are not regulated at all. It doesn't take anything to go get yourself set up as running a rehabilitation center, and so there's no standard, treatments that people are going through. It's just kind of like, and depending on how much money you have, some of these people are going in and it's just a country club and they're not really fucking doing the work. They're just staying there, because it's court ordered, and then they're out, So I think we have to fix that. And there needs to be some pretty stringent like oversight and regulation into those rehabilitation centers. Some of them have even been very abusive to people, and had issues that way.
Yeah, their track records are all over the board.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. But even then, you're looking at like like you're talking about no standardization of treatment. That's another issue that begins on a societal level when we're making these things illegal and just essentially turning a blind eye to them. We're not doing the research. We're not looking at what really makes these things tick and real ways that we could look at correcting these behavioral patterns and things of that nature, so that we can have standardized treatment. Like, we can't even begin to form a basis for regulation when the only way that we look at it is, oh, you do drugs, you're a criminal. You can't really begin to form a basis for regulation of treatment off of that, And there's like 12-step programs, and there's different programs that are out there, and some of them are faith-based and some of them aren't. And there's no standardization of it because there's no standing body of knowledge in some ways. Like there definitely is. There's definitely been some research done, but imagine the vastly higher sample size you would have if it wasn't all dependent on self-reporting and people who were incriminating themselves, to
Right.
tell, healthcare workers or things like that about it. And I mean, obviously there's HIPAA, but I mean, you get what I'm saying.
I would also say that I think Blizzard, like it really any like these things are like could be done somewhat piecemeal. I would be fine with like if we could get rehab reform done just like as one of the more obvious no-brainer things that seems like it should probably be more regulated, that like there's a baseline of like a standardized level of care that rehabs perform. That seems like that would be a more no-brainer one, and that like I could take that piecemeal before I take like the other things getting decriminalized, because like I would take the things that seem like they would help save lives more immediately first. For sure. And like, so I guess, and like the interesting thing about having somebody who disagrees here is that we could maybe find like where exactly that like interesting compromise is, or like where is the more pragmatic thing that we could realistically argue for right now.
I think that's something that should be pointed out about the stance of decriminalization. Look at my dad. This is not something we want just like thrown out overnight and just see what happens. That's something that needs to be carefully considered, and each step needs to be measured and calculated and done with thought and intent behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would even
given time to look at it and see how it's actually working. None of us know how this looks, so.
We have, I mean, I guess we have some examples now, right? We've got places that are moving closer to this, and it seems to not be like, it certainly doesn't lead to like the zombies on the streets type outcome that like a lot of people would like you to think that like legalizing crack or any of these things would lead to.
From what I've seen, it seems like there's a slight uptick in the like immediately, but then an evening out and then a dipping of the actual numbers,
which is probably what I would expect. I think like I think like unfortunately there would be some degree of like, I mean, it sounds like the most insensitive way to put it, but like there would be a level of like Darwinism day one. You know what I mean? Like, but also all these people are likely to eventually find fentanyl now anyways. Like it's just a matter of time before they hit the thing. So yeah, I think like maybe there's a lot of people who would go out and like get just a shit ton of like heroin or not be used to it, and that or some there's going to be some bad, but like I think that it's a matter of like risk calculation versus what is actively happening year after year right now.
Again, it's harm reduction, I think, is a lot of the issue that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think you could even like phase in by the severity of the drug to to eliminate some of the shock.
Let's take it back and break the argument down a little more simply. Like let's look at, so Blizzard, you definitely agree weed should be decriminalized. Next logical step. What about psychedelics? What about other things that have been proven to have, some sort of a benefit and an actual medicinal use?
I'm fairly pro psychedelics. I know there's a lot of science going on right now into the, studying these psychedelics in clinical atmospheres. So I think that the psychedelics are going to be shown to be positive when used in a I can't think of the word, like in a clinical setting. Way, or
like a controlled environment.
You're right. Controlled environment in general is what I would say. Yeah. So like so then it follows. There's obviously
to
there's
me
a
it's like the
pathway.
hard drugs are the things that are the super gray areas to me, like the heroin, the meth, the crack. In
a lot of ways, though, there's a subjective look at that, at like where do you draw that line? Because some people would consider like mushrooms and acid and stuff like that hard drugs, ketamine, MDMA. A lot of people would consider that hard drugs, but to those of us who have had experience with them or been around them, we know that they're not as anywhere near as dangerous. Like MDMA can definitely be dangerous, but not anywhere near as dangerous as heroin or meth or crack cocaine. Which I mean, honestly, let's just say if we decriminalized cocaine, I don't think you'd be running into a whole lot of crack cocaine anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you could just be getting cocaine.
Yeah,
That's my
So-
issue with crack is just like the other crime that goes along with it.
right.
yeah.
And
Same with all the other hard drugs. Like, yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's
right.
the biggest issue with all the drugs. But presumably, like I think one of the biggest arguments there is that like you would hope that a lot of dealers are just done. They've just been undercut. They've just been fucked by like the man who is constantly going to have the very best heroin that you could possibly ever put into your body. Like people will probably pay that premium to get the because like it's one thing with some weed. You know what I mean? When you're paying some weed tax or whatever, you might go to another person because like what the fuck's this person going to do to my weed? But like when you're buying some hard shit, I think people are definitely down. They would be definitely down to go through the state-sponsored heroin to know that it's not going to be cut or fucked up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you know, I'm going to go back to it again. It's the fentanyl thing, you know, like it because it's in everything now. You know, it really is that. You know, I think there's a lot of people that just don't want to fucking die. You know, like
you can't do a cup of coke nowadays, man, without
know,
without
right?
worrying about whether or not the fentanyl is going to get you.
It's a damn
You know?
shame.
That's awful. But I mean,
Anybody
like,
ask
look
Miami how they're doing?
do what?
There's no. Did anybody ask in Miami how they're doing? There's no
I haven't
cocaine right
checked
now.
in
They
with
just damn. Somebody should get on the phone with them.
Just call up Miami, like 1-800
Oh,
Yo
yeah.
Miami.
oh yeah, you know they decriminalized drugs in Oregon, and they haven't seen like a massive spike in drug use. It really hasn't, you know.
Right. Yeah. That
Even
was
if-
kind of
okay.
the.
So we're looking at heroin users. Okay, heroin users a lot of the time are not particularly violent people. You know, like the idea that there's a black market and there's all this like competition and then gang activity and like organized crime that forms around that probably leads to a fair amount of violence. But like your average heroin user is a guy who's like banging some heroin in his arm and passing out on his couch.
Yeah,
you
I'm
know?
more worried about that kind of guy stealing my shit than I am him hurting
Right.
anybody.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And then-
That's kind
and
of
then-
where I was going with it.
Yeah, and then you've got, I think that it would probably get cheaper in that situation.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like part of the premium that you would pay for something like that is because of the danger in possessing it, and the scarcity that creates. So the supply goes up, demand stays pretty well where it's at, I would imagine. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of new people that are like, oh, heroin's fucking legal now, let me go try that shit out, But like meth is one that I think about, and there was something interesting that came to mind just a minute ago about that. In our area, Appalachia, meth is running fucking rampant right now. And the amount of crime that's attached to that is crazy.
Mhm.
And you hear about a lot of crime attached to methamphetamine. But you know what you don't hear about? You don't hear about people abusing Adderall and going out and getting in fights with 7 cops.
They'll do it.
Even though it's amphetamine, it's regulated. It's FDA approved. It doesn't have fucking, whatever chemicals, some guy fucking mixed up in his bathtub in it,
Fucking match
Like-
heads, match
Yeah,
heads and
it's-
piss.
Right. It's I think that a lot of these things, man, if you were dealing with regulated and more controlled and pure and, reviewed substances would just naturally decrease in severity.
I agree with that. I think a lot of it is a lot of the, talk about erratic behavior and stuff. I think that has a lot to do with the free radicals that are being put into these drugs that, probably don't belong there in the first place. But again, we talk about the drug dealer's aim is to make money. They're going to make money however they can. Do they cut
And
shit?
if that's by
Fuck
making
yeah.
a cheaper
you know?
product,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just to play devil's advocate again here, in this scenario, aren't we turning the government into the drug dealer?
they
A
already
little bit,
are.
They've been the drug dealer.
Right. Or like big pharma,
A little bit, yeah.
Who put
Yeah.
the profit margin above human life all the time.
But
Yeah,
again,
but profit margin would be drastically undercut if people were just dying on their watch, as opposed to this nameless black market, this like ambiguous, for like there's a clear okay, it's big pharma. That's the motherfuckers doing this
Yeah.
wrong. As
Yeah,
there's
opposed
I was
to
accountability
leading
that
to
comes
the,
with that. Yeah, there's accountability that comes with that. And like right now with the black market, those pharmaceutical companies are absolutely 100% involved in the opioid trade.
Yeah, right.
100%
That's where I was
proven.
going.
There's settlements every year about this.
Yeah, the Sacklers were
and
Right
right
taking
now,
leading to the like OxyContin talk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they obviously overprescribed OxyContin to millions of people, like through the medical field.
literally
And
the
it-
county in which Caleb lives, I know this because I'm a journalist. The county in which Caleb lives was Purdue Pharmaceuticals' #1 hotbed for unloading oxycodone during the height of the opioid epidemic in the nation. There were enough doses of Oxy 30s distributed for every man,
insane.
woman, and child to have 300 doses a month
Holy
in that county
fuck.
in 2014. There was a massive, like $2 billion settlement, if I'm not remembering the numbers incorrectly about it. And so, what you create when you have this black market right now is you have these pharmaceutical companies are able to get off scot-free because they have a fucking scapegoat. It's Timmy the bad man who went to the pain clinic and got the fucking drugs and sold them. It's not us pumping in a fucking absolutely irresponsible amount of drugs into these places and making sure the supply is always refreshed.
right.
You
Well,
see what I'm saying?
yeah,
Not to
this
mention
is
the
just
pressure that
things
they put
I
on
worry
doctors
about.
and shit. You know, like
Yeah. And then they got these people that these drug consultants that are going around getting bonuses for how much they're able to ship to a doctor. I mean, they're absolutely already involved in it. So why not make them the sole players and introduce some fucking accountability?
Well, I mean, even if you look at the weed market, it didn't get taken over by the pharmaceutical industry. People who knew how to make and grow the best product stepped up and started, growing and, producing the best products. And that's what ended up on the shelves in the dispensaries. So it's not to say that, there couldn't be a company out there that is really, really good at making cocaine and creates a legitimate business out of it, and they're
who's making this Novocaine?
But I mean, honestly,
They
to be
already
clear,
got
like
the plug, dog.
my version of this has always been a little different. Like I've always kind of like Waylon said, like with scheduling. So like, like if we retain scheduling, I think it makes a lot more sense to make a thing like a weed dispensary. But I don't think that like a weed dispensary and a heroin clinic would be 1-to-1. And like they're going like it's not like they're going to be vastly different experiences with vastly different regulations and like it's so
and
like
vastly different representation.
and
Yeah.
so like
a whole hell of a lot more weed clinics than there are heroin clinics.
and they're going to be less theoretically they should be less for profit. We should just be paying for them. We should be doing that basically just at a loss until it starts being better than the loss we're taking right now, and then it's like we're gaining in the long run.
Yeah, hell, look at it from a fiscally conservative viewpoint, like the amount of fucking tax money that's being poured in.
Yeah, it's always more effective to take people, take care of people when they're beginning their journey through life or during their first parts of their journey than after something happens,
That's kind of that's kind of the big thing for me too, is like introducing like much healthier stopgaps than we currently have. Because I mean, like the stopgap that Jason got hit with is just like, here's your fucking career is fucked, when it should have been like, you guys got some pot. You know what I mean? Like it should have been nothing. They should have literally been like literally, and like to I guess kind of answer your thing earlier, if you really wanted to like make a separation between legalize and decriminalize, in the decriminalized version, I think the very most that should happen to Waylon is, or not Waylon, but Jason, is he has his pot taken, but he isn't taken. You know what I mean? Like confiscation is still theoretically on the table in decriminalization, whereas in legalization you would expect it to be like you can just have heroin on you, or you can,
or you just get a ticket instead of go to jail. They take your shit and you get a ticket, whatever, pay $25.
That's kind of where decriminalization ends up at. Like, to some degree, like this is actually not a very widely known thing, Caleb, here in Kentucky, but to some degree, we have a mild amount of like defelonization of weed, at least, if that's even a word. I mean, it's a misdemeanor here now. Like, they're going to take your weed and slap you with $100 fine, and you go on about your business, get a misdemeanor charge.
And it's up to like, we've always had a pretty lenient level. It's always been up to like 8 ounces. Yeah. Which is, I mean, there are states where it's like if you've got an eighth on you, you're done. Like,
hello,
so,
Texas.
I mean, I'm a vocal proponent of medical marijuana and a vocal proponent of legalization, and I just the more I look at it, the more I think about it. Like, this was not something that I arrived at overnight. You know what I mean? This was like it's saying that all drugs should be legalized. It was not something that I just was like, "Yep, that follows suit. I like doing drugs. Make them legal so I can get them." You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
it was a this is a considered stance of mine. Like, this is one of the things that I probably feel most strongly about. And you know, going back looking at human civilization since the dawn of time has always valued altered states of consciousness and their ability to give us some insight and to be able to look at things in a different way than just the what I think Graham Hancock would call the alert problem solving state of mind, you know? So all the way back to the dawn of civilization, you know this, you talked about the Amanita muscara and the
I can't
cave
believe
paintings
Graham
of people with
Hancock gets
mushroom heads.
Graham Hancock gets cited in this episode and not the conspiracy episode. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm doing
I
it,
can't.
man.
I can't believe.
Graham Hancock's pretty pimp though, so like.
Yeah, I like Graham Hancock, but he does some out there stuff, and I'm not bought into all of it, but I do like his stuff.
I like what he talks about psychedelics. I like what he
He's
says
an awesome
about
storyteller, man. No, regardless of if what he's
got a
saying
dope
is
voice.
accurate or not. Yeah, yeah. I could listen to him fucking read anything basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. But
No, hey, go ahead.
it just seemed funny to me that I was like, damn, Graham Hancock we did a whole episode conspiracy, hour and a half, 2 hours talking about it. We went long that episode. No Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I guess my point though with all of that is that this is like a spiritual sickness in some ways to me, I think, in our society that like really negatively affects our overall function in such a really difficult way. Like, even just looking at like smoking a peace pipe, you know, for you know, First Nations people, Native Americans people, you know, people in general throughout history who have had using some amount of recreational substance as just a way to blow off some damn steam and just to like have responsibly get away from, you know, like nobody looks down on somebody wanting to have a glass of wine after work to de-stress and decompress a little bit. But like, what about when that gets to the point where after work one day is really just not enough to do it? You know what I mean? Like, we're always in this alert, problem-solving state of mind, and these anxieties, they build up, these pressures, they build up, they build up, they build up, and our society has no recompense for that currently in a lot of ways. And in the past, we did. And it seems like people were much more apt to, I think mental health has gotten worse as a result of prohibition.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You know,
people in the 30s were smoking joints and blowing on, you know, jazz trumpets and having a damn good time, you know, even though there was a Great Depression going on.
They found solace in the weed.
Yeah, and there's you know there's an argument to be made for that. I'm sure I'm not really stating it in the best possible way, and like there's probably some like false equivalency going on there, but like I think you get my point. Is that this is a fairly recent thing. Poppies have been around for thousands of years. Opioids have been around for hundreds of thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And only recently have they become such a fucking widespread problem after they were criminalized. People go buy cough syrup that had fucking heroin in it, you know? Like,
well, and I think a lot of that
Sody pops used to have coke in them. Like,
I think a lot of that has to do with like economic anxieties. I think a lot of that has to do with just the justice system in general. I mean, I really think that people are, you know, it's funny. I heard it said one time that it's not that people are suffering more mental illness. It's that they're actually within themselves trying to correct a fucked up world that we're living in right now. You know, it's like, no, they're not ill. That's what they're doing that because their body should be doing that because things are so fucked up right now for everybody, you know? And I think that's why you see like an increase in drug use, why you see an increase in addiction, because there's a lot of other anxieties that people are carrying right now that they're burdened with, that I think in times past weren't quite the same. I mean, we're in a very rapid moving world where we expect an awful lot from one another. We expect an awful lot from ourselves. And I think people internalize a lot more now. And so in order to deal with that, yeah, you're going to have more addiction. You're going to have more people doing drugs and using substances because that's where the relief is, you know?
right. And what was I going to say? There was another point that I had about that. Yep, nope, I've lost it. Brain took a
Happens to the
doo-doo on
best
me.
of us.
It's gone. But it's just like, if we had that introspection, like for instance, that psychedelics give you, if we had that on a more like, because that was a cultural thing for a lot of these, civilizations that use this stuff, enough so that they like depicted it in their, you know, their religious like cave paintings and their artwork, and it was a spiritual thing, and it was systematically like, probably in some places I'd imagine it was a rite of passage to do that and to like have that level of introspection. What kind of a profound effect would that have on our society as a whole? If everybody was like on that level of being like, you know what, man, I checked out my brain a month or so ago on some psychedelics, and I think there's definitely some better ways I could be looking at things and dealing with things. If everybody did that, I'm not saying that it's for everybody. Like, there's obviously some outliers to that and exceptions to that, but on a mass
I'm maybe
scale,
not even sold on like, I don't know. I mean, like, I think that like, I don't think the human condition is something that can be cured with even because like if you look at times past, sure, all of those things are happening, but we're way more chill societally than we were. That like, yeah, sure, they were maybe like societally all tripping once in their lives for sure, but they were also like crusading at the same time. So like,
Yeah.
I think
that's
we're actually
that's what my thought was that I lost. Yes, okay. So Jason was talking about like how fucked up society is nowadays, and like in some ways that's true, but then in other ways, it's also, like we've said before multiple times, it's also the best time ever in the history of the world to be a human being. It is easier to live now than ever before.
yeah, and pretty much any like I mean, pick the metric.
Yeah.
Like pick what's the yeah, just about any measurable way. Yeah. Which I mean, I think that whenever you say that, people like have like a knee jerk to it, and like it's to be clear, like the message is not we should stop making strides here.
No, we definitely need to improve more. There's more that can be done. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
today is always the best day there's ever been.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
definitely not saying the advent of technology hasn't helped or benefited us. I think it's a double-edged sword sometimes, though. I think it's a different beast altogether, and I think that'll especially with the digital age. I mean, we have people that were alive before there were even computers and shit. They're still trying to figure out how to fucking code.
Close to home.
Hey, I'm 41, man. I'm there with you. Like,
Oh, right on. Okay.
Damn, I didn't peg you for 41, Jason.
yeah. I
is
know. I look
20s?
great, don't I?
Yeah.
What is not computer? What do you mean?
There was a before time.
There was a time before? What did you do? How did you get your 4chan?
I don't
But,
know.
like-
I had a hard time getting my files out of the computer, though. I kept trying to like get the computer open to pull the files out, and I couldn't. I couldn't get the files out.
Yeah.
I broke so many cases.
They're in the computer. We talking about Zoolander? Is that what we're referencing right now? Okay. But no, I guess like there's a way to look at that, man. Like, so physically, definitely, it's easier now to be a human being than it ever has been. So now, just as naturally warring creatures, have we just turned to warring inside our own minds instead of, having some physical threat that we have to defend ourselves
Yeah, I bet
against?
I bet there's some real damning stats though. Like I wonder, like I bet there actually are a couple metrics. Like I would be curious to see if suicide was worse before.
That would be
seems
interesting.
Like a thing.
Yeah,
That
would
seems
be
like a thing I could see being worse now, or like, but like.
So now
Yeah.
the enemy is no longer external. It's no longer a pack of wolves that might eat you while you're asleep. It's now something, a construct within your mind that's attacking you, and your battles with that now.
Well, like
Maybe
we
it's just
talked
like
about in the first
idle
episode, though, I think
hands.
we've somewhat replaced that too, though. Like so much of like I think now we have a tendency to blow our current issues up to like a catastrophe level, right? Like we tend to argue everything as if it was like the debates that were happening on the UN floor in like the 40s. Like that.
Yeah.
That's I think that's part of the war that we play on ourselves is just the human like the part where like I think that everybody probably feels like they're in a really, really important time, even if you look back on like the Jimmy Carter era and you're like, oh, like one thing happened.
Yeah.
You know
Right,
what I mean?
right,
But
yeah.
they were probably like every news story then they're like, holy shit, Jimmy Carter fucking peanut farms and like they're like that's probably a much bigger deal, every little thing. And now we look back and we're like
historically
there's like the one
inconsequential
coup.
era. That's like what we can
Yeah.
remember about it is like peanut farms, Jimmy Carter, peanuts,
Right.
and Jimmy Carter.
It's always those iconic or ironic, I should say, that the end is always nigh, but today is always the best day to be alive. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
throughout
yeah.
time.
Is it just the entropic nature
Accurate.
of the universe? Is it just the fact that we are at our core primates and that we have a strife within us that if it can't be turned toward wild animals, will be turned toward our brethren and toward our own minds? And maybe is that the value of these altered states of consciousness, is that they allow us to rise above those animalistic drives to find conflict and everything?
I think that you might be onto something there. I also think that might be the reason that you see like an increase in mental health issues, or so perceivably so, anyways. And
Or is there just more? Some people would say there's just more awareness of it now.
I think there's also this thing of like, and you touched on it a minute there, but I think like there was a time where like if like, and I'm just using a most basic, it's kind of a pedestrian example, but your old lady cheats on you with a dude, like you gonna beat the fuck out of that dude, like you drag his ass, dude, like you would fucking beat the living shit out of him. I mean, almost to
When
death.
you say there was a time,
But you know what I'm saying? Like now but now it's not as socially acceptable, right? Like now
right.
to go do something like that, you're definitely going to fucking prison, or some shit, or going to jail at the very least, And so what do? We internalize that same rage that we would otherwise be expressing outwardly. And, I think that does add up. I think that does build up. I think
Eastern Kentucky's a wild ass place, dude. I'm pretty sure I can get away with that.
maybe that's where I need to go.
Oh yeah, you can still get away with that here.
I'm pretty sure I'd get off scot free. I'm pretty sure I could go up to his porch and drag him onto it.
That's exactly my point, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that your recompense for your where I guess better word would be recourse. Recourse for that in past would be duel me in the streets, motherfucker. Or I'm going down to the speakeasy and I'm going to fucking bang some heroin for a few hours and fucking forget about this. And when I wake up tomorrow, it won't be such a big issue to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was ever the most common. I feel like most people
it's just an example.
Most people just drank.
But I mean, in times where we were fucking sharpening the sticks and hunting down other tribes of people over much.
Oh yeah,
much
people were
smaller
smoking, doing all sorts of crazy shit. Yeah,
They were
for
doing some
sure.
wild shit back in them days. Probably that jinkum. is what it was. They were doing jinkum.
Don't huff shit, kids. Don't huff shit.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I also think that there's certain drugs that I think that if you're caught making new crazy shit to get high on, like those people who were getting high on like they were spraying like wasp spray on the fucking metal screens and then like heating that up, and then there was people that were doing this, and then the shit that would like come off of the screen after they would like heat them up, it would solidify, and then they would smoke that shit. And I think that if you're caught doing that, I think the very first time somebody like a cop rolls up on your house and you've got like a car battery and jumpers hooked to a screen that you're spraying wasp spray onto, you should just go straight to jail for life. There shouldn't even be a trial. They should be like, this is far too ratchet for society.
It's
what
like,
are you
all right,
like?
bro, listen, there's enough drugs. You don't got to be trying to find more.
Yeah, like exactly. If we've legalized everything and then you find some psychopath doing this, it's like, buddy, what the fuck do we got to do for
Doing
you?
my best here for you guys.
We didn't know you would even want this.
That individual's beyond help.
Yeah, like straight to jail.
Straight to jail forever.
Yeah, fuck that.
1,000
shit.
years dungeon.
Yeah. Shackle them, walk of shame them.
Yep.
Put them
If
in a
it
cell.
looks sketchy, it probably is.
Oh yes.
But I don't know, man. We get off on a tangent and fucking meme about this all day, but I guess like it boils down to, again, We keep attacking these fucking huge topics with this podcast. There's no possible way that us fucking four idiots are gonna figure out. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, it's not so much. I guess I don't have any grandiose opinion of our ability to just like, all right, and here is the policy binder that I've got written up. You guys want to go through it? You know, like I don't have any inkling that that's the case.
Let's
But
solve problem number 4 today, gentlemen.
yeah, it's almost like you know, if you can kind of like imagine something like wedged in between two trees on a hillside, and we're just kind of like, I kind of think of us as like the stick that's trying to poke it on through so it can continue its, you know, journey down the hill.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea. So like these discussions are like, you know, the idea is to kind of like prod society or like to spark more discussions around these topics.
Yeah, like we pay we pay people and elect them to figure this shit out. We're just pointing out that they need to get to fucking work.
Right.
is basically the thing, you know, in some ways. Like, is it just a human condition thing? Is it the internalization of what used to be outward aggressions? Is it the lack of having those valued altered state? What is the does it at least, it definitely at least warrants taking a look at and trying to see, like, is there an alternative way to do this?
Honestly, I think like as far as like what's keeping it there, like what's the thing that's like stopping people? I mean, it's probably mostly like I don't hear a whole lot of young people arguing for like prohibition. It just doesn't seem to happen. And it honestly, like it seems like it kind of starts around like, you know, Jason and Blizz's age, and then from there the scale of like absolutely the fuck not starts going through the roof. You know, like people are just like, nope, definitely not, certainly no way. So I got to imagine that like there's part of it, like it's just going to be it's already becoming a more popular position. I feel like whenever I was saying this like 4 and 5 years ago, people thought they were just they did kind of look at me as like, oh, okay, I get it, fucking stoner bro, a drug dude, fucking dirt to dirt. Now you can at least come to the table with it and you know, argue some fucking points without people kind of like, yeah, people don't like laugh the idea out of the door already. So that's a pretty good step in that direction, I would say.
Well, yeah, oh, dude, definitely. Like my senior year of high school, I wrote a research paper that was what I ended up, you know, saving my English grade with and graduating with. It was about marijuana legalization, and at the time, that was a spicy fucking meatballa for you know, a senior in high school to be discussing. 2010 it was before it was, you know, legal in 2/3 of the country. You know what I mean? Like it was before it had swept outside of really even California. So I mean, it's definitely progressed a lot over the past few years, and like the fact that we can even openly have this conversation and like mention psychedelics without feeling like we're going to be made into pariahs is a big step.
Well, so I'm going to kind of blow your guys' minds for a second. The first person that encouraged like full legalization to me was my dad. He was an attorney. And he did a lot of like pro bono work. He was not like a rich attorney by any means, because he did most of his work for free. But he was a huge proponent of that even back in the 80s. And he tried to talk a lot about that, and people did think he was really fucking radical and crazy. But it's like he saw what a lot of other people saw. His sister died of a heroin overdose on his living room floor. When that happened, you know, she was in a full-blown addiction, and she was, you know, working in as a sex worker. And as a result of that, she tried to get out, and some of the people that she was working for didn't want her out. And the way the investigation hashed out was that these guys had given her a hot dose because she didn't want to stay in the profession and she was trying to get out. And basically killed her on my dad's living room floor. And after that, he's like, I think he came to the realization that had she been able to get what she needed and not had to go through those sources and it not be stigmatized and her not have to worry about jail and all the other things that went along with it, she'd probably be okay. Because even he pointed out, like, even when she was in active use, as long as she like had it, she was relatively okay. She was functional. She didn't, you know, she wasn't like completely fucking out of it. And the way he made it sound is she was never trying to get herself to the high of like, you know, she's trying to like, you know, OD or put herself out. She was just maintaining, you know. And I think after he saw that, that's when his kind of ideals around that changed, where he became more pro just full legalization, because, you know, it would have saved her life, you know, and probably would have saved, you know, and at the risk of, I'm not trying to sound callous or anything like that, but it probably would have saved some of your friends' lives too. Let's say, you know, because of that quality control, because of the ability to take away the ability for others to exploit you over something that's illicit, you know, because that's the other part of it. There's an exploitation factor that happens too.
And you don't turn somebody that just likes to get fucked up into a criminal and get them involved with the criminal underbelly that does all that, you know?
Yeah, you kind of get pushed into it. It starts out with like, oh yeah, we're having fun, and the next thing you know, like you're indebted to somebody, and then, you know, this is how you're going to work it off, you know, and then you can't get out of it. You get stuck in that loop, you know. It's a different loop than the justice system loop, but a loop nevertheless that results in the same ends.
And I mean, you look at like with, you know, alcohol. Most people, and I mean, there are definitely a lot of people that struggle with alcohol addiction and dependency and the issues that go with that. But most people, they turn 21 and they're like, okay, I can get fucked up now. And they go through, you know, a 4 or 5 year phase of like going to the clubs and getting drunk every weekend and like really just living for that. And then eventually they're like, all right, I'm out. I'm done. I've had enough of this. This was fun for a minute. And now it's time to get on with the rest of the business of life. Most people do take that path. And so imagine if that was the same path for drug users, if it wasn't like this big fucking mission that they had to take on every day. You know what I mean? To go and try to get their drugs. If they could just go to the store and buy them and go through, you know, they reach a certain age and then they could sow their wild oats and mature out of it. And there was a means to get out of it. And they weren't carrying around a fucking criminal record and they weren't impoverished because of it. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I think the destigmatization of the actual drug abuser themselves would go a long way as far as that goes.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I think we're kind of all in agreement that we shouldn't be like incentivizing addictive behaviors, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So like de-incentivizing would probably be okay, right?
Yes.
I mean, maybe not in the form that it is now, but still de-incentivizing the addictive behaviors and promoting mental health, right? So it would be like, it seems like two different avenues. There's like the healthcare side and then like the legal system side.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it seems like there's very much two arguments there, right?
Yeah.
And then like it's weird because they're all like deeply it's all
kind of, so
yeah
to say.
yeah and it's all bad. Like I'm not a big fan of how we handle it in most instances. And like the annoying thing is like some of the things that we do that seem like no-brainers are like the things that you actually hear people talking about, like real people. Like if you go to, you know, not the Twitches, but like the debates that happen on Facebook are even crazier. They're like, should we even give these people who are ODing Narcan?
Yeah,
like that's the
right.
kind of shit that they're talking about on there.
Yeah.
Not like, you know, hey, maybe we should like, you know, worry about like treating these people and like maybe we should spend more money on them. That's the conversation we're having. But the conversation that a lot of people are having are like, maybe we should just let them die. And like,
Right.
that's like, you know, that's a fortunate spot to like know you're at.
That emotionally like gets me a little worked up just hearing like thinking about that. And that is true. I've seen it myself. And it's just like, dude, if that was your family member or your close friend, would you still feel the same way? Like if you knew that this was
anything
a good
can happen
person who
tomorrow,
just,
man.
yeah, ended up hooked on this shit, and like, man, that's just so fucked up. I can't imagine feeling that way about it.
And I think
Yeah,
that might be
no.
like the best part that has come from this episode so far is that what we basically have said is that we need to literally create a new regulatory industry in this sector. I think it's more like a rhetorical, it's kind of bad rhetoric. And I mean, I'm going to compare it, but it's not exactly the same here. But like with the you know, a cab and you know, defund the police. It's just bad rhetoric. It doesn't convey what you actually want to happen. You know what I mean? And I think that there are compromises to be made, because obviously I agree that there are, you know,
And I think
Yeah.
there are
healthcare
probably
sides
some
and the
people-
criminal sides.
There are probably some people out there arguing it from a real fucking dumbass standpoint. Like, I just want to be able to get fucked up.
Right, but those
You know,
people
like,
are never going to be taken seriously by
No.
the opposition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Legalize all drugs and let God sort them out. You know, no big deal.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like,
there probably are
But
people out there
actually,
arguing
to
from that
actually get
dumbass
anything
angle.
done, to actually make any headway on the subject, it's like that's not going to work.
No,
Right.
and that's not what I don't think that's what anybody on this conversation is.
Right,
stumbling
exactly. Like I
I'm
said, I think
certainly
that's
don't feel that way. That's a very irresponsible decision to take on my
that
book.
seems like the most positive thing to come out of this talk in general, is that we actually have gained some clarity on what it means instead of just the tagline. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And that's a problem with, you know, that's an entirely different discussion about attention spans and reading the headline and formulating your entire opinion based on the headline. You know what I mean? Like, not looking into the meat of the subject, but
Yeah.
But if that, hey, you know, and we talk about, you know, humans have a psychological predisposition toward a negativity bias, and if that gets people pissed off and gets them invested in the conversation, and you can have the conversation in this one-to-one kind of face-to-face format, then maybe it is a good thing that that's somewhat incendiary to say, like, decriminalize all drugs. You know,
right.
there's
Right.
a reason that it's been put that
Right.
way, but it
Kind of
has
like the big ask.
conversation has to follow. Yeah, the big ask, and then you break it down, and you're like, well, here's where I want to compromise, and here's where I want to make, you know, concessions for, like, obviously you can't fucking give preschoolers heroin, bro. Like,
Right.
that's not what I'm arguing.
Right.
Well, and you know, to that end, even on some level, I would think that we should employ now, not Dare, because all Dare did was encourage me to do drugs. And I'm not even gonna lie. When they were talking about I was gonna get free drugs in high school, I was like, "Fucking where? Please help me out!" Right? Like, I'm supposed to be getting all these free drugs and shit. Where the fuck are the free
Dude, you
drugs
just
at?
reminded me. I gotta go pick up some candy tomorrow and start stuffing that shit full of edibles. Hand out to kids for Halloween.
But you know, I think a level of education, like let's say, okay, well, I want to go to the pharmacy and buy psilocybin. Let's say I want to do mushrooms. Okay, well, in order to do that, you got to go sit through a little class that teaches you about what mushrooms do, how they affect you, like what signs to look out for, you know, how to mitigate like bad trips and shit like that. And then, okay, there you go. You know, now you can, there's your way, and now you can go do them, you know, like, but I think even stuff like that would be helpful because, you know, what I saw, and the reason I say that is, as being in a legal marijuana state and seeing these people go to the hospital for eating fucking edibles is so fucking mind-boggling to me. Because a lot of them went because they didn't know how hard it was going to hit them, and they just fucking ate like way too fucking much, and they freaked the fuck out. They had anxiety attacks and shit, you know?
Yeah.
They weren't fucking dying. Nothing was happening to them. Nothing, you know, like they were just really fucking high, you know?
I had a
And it's
really
like-
good buddy of mine that was an everyday smoker that ate an edible for the first time and literally went to the hospital.
You know how hard it would be to like
Heard that
actually like
911 call where that guy's like, "We ate some edibles, and time has slowed down, and I think we're dying."
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
person on the other end
you know how
of the line, like,
unlikely it would be
it's really
anyways
high.
to eat like a loose peach ring? Like, what am I gonna give these kids? Like this, like these are edibles, but like, what parent is gonna be like, yeah, just eat that is just that the guy just dropped into your pail, or like even if it's wrapped up, like
Entirely ignoring COVID.
yeah, like it's just not like, even just from like the, first of all, like I probably already look like a person where they're like, honey, kind of separate his candy if you can, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, damn, this guy he looks bearded and rational, but I don't know if I trust him with my child. He looks like
Yeah.
he looks like a psychopath. On the one hand, he looks like Jesus, but he definitely looks like he smokes some weed.
Watch out for those cocaine fun dips.
Yeah, right.
Jesus would have been for legalizing drugs, I think.
I think so. I think so too. He would have been cool with it.
Yeah,
So
he
we
was
are
like,
past the 11:30 mark. This is usually where we'll head into the Q&A section. Jason, if anybody in your chat ends up throwing up any questions here, if you want to just like fill them to us, you know,
Sure.
feel free to have let them know that they can ask. The other thing is that if you want to hop into the waiting room in the Discord, it's exclamation Discord in the chat. If you want to get the link, and then we'll prioritize people who hop into voice. But other than that, we'll move.
Anybody got any questions in chat? You can ask Blizza,
I guess one thing
Waylon,
that was in the chat,
me,
that Jay Freak
Tenflix,
said,
anyone.
just a little bit ago that I can go back to, is that I think there is something to that. The loudest ones that are for drug legalizations are the ones that use it quite a lot, and I think that they might be more likely to use some drugs, but I also think that if they are likely to use some drugs, they're probably more likely to be like pot smokers, which is already like a way easier argument to stake out. You could be very, very specific to pot and basically get no pushback from almost anybody anymore, unless they're literally a lawmaker.
I think last time I saw it was 73% of the country is for like legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. Like,
yeah. It's
so,
coming. I mean, there's nothing that's going to stop marijuana at this point. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
People on the left better get their shit in order before someone on the right comes and steals it and takes the glory for it.
Yeah, true.
I think there's a lot of clarification that can be made too. And like, this is something I didn't bring up in our earlier points because we were talking about the more severe side of things. But there are people who use hard drugs responsibly as well.
Oh yeah.
And oddly enough, like you probably know some people in their fucking 50s and 60s that are fucking straight up fucking munching pain pills every day and are totally functional and normal fucking members of society. You know what I mean?
Like Christopher Walken, for example.
Yeah, it doesn't always end in fucking I'm addicted and now I'm gonna overdose on fucking heroin. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So
no,
there is that group of people as well.
I got a question.
Yeah.
This is from Drucifer the Hermit. He says, do you think legalizing drugs and making specific clubs like bars to enjoy them in a safe environment will ever be feasible?
Absolutely, having a community aspect of it is an important part, I think, because if you have these, like, it's not just to jump on it and cut anybody else off that might have something to say, but look at needle exchanges. One of the biggest things about needle exchanges is it gives people a safe place to do this where they can be supervised and they can be seen by people who know what the signs are of, like, this is getting truly dangerous at this point. And it's something like in most places where needle exchanges have been implemented, it's something like 70% of the people who take part in them end up going into some kind of a treatment if they have a negative outcome from addiction,
Mm-hmm.
So I think absolutely there needs to be, because a lot of the problem is that these people end up isolated, man. They can't hold down a job because they're fucking staying fucked up all the time, or they've got a criminal record because of their drug use in the past and blah, 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 blah. They isolate themselves from society. There's no checks and balances there for somebody to say, hey man, you're getting a little out of control. If you're at a bar and you're getting really super drunk and you're acting like an idiot, other people are gonna be like, hey man, you're acting like an idiot. Maybe let's get you to bed.
And I mean, like we mentioned yesterday, that bartenders do have an active responsibility in curbing how fucked up you're getting.
But depending on where you're at, like in my state, you have to be certified. You know what I mean? You have to have gone through the training and all that.
I would say that, like, maybe I would.
J Freak said, this would come naturally from legalization. Bars were banned when prohibition was around. They came back when it was legal. Yeah, I mean, like right now, you got speakeasies for drug use, bro. You got trap houses all over the fucking place.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
not just that, but even in legalized places, like again in Chicago, it's marijuana's completely legal, recreationally even, and they're starting to the on-site consumption bars are already starting to pop up. They're a little slower than the dispensaries, but they're starting to come out, and it's just natural, I think.
We're just, I mean, we've been legal, I think, for like 10 years now or something, and we're just getting the actual consumption locations and stuff. And I know Vegas has just started getting those as well. And they're starting to pop up in LA too a little bit, but it's still relatively new in a lot of places. And here, we did have, like, once it became legal, there were like at least medically legal anyways, before it went full recreational. There was like basically little speakeasies you could go to that like you could go get your weed there and hang out and smoke and just chill out. As a matter of fact, I met a basketball player one time, and I ended up like smoking a whole ass blunt with him. It was like during the Super Bowl weekend or something here. I can't remember what the fuck that guy's name was. Oh, he got me so ripped, and like I didn't even know who it was, and then I walked out and they're like, "Hey, that's like so and so basketball player, some slam dunk champion for the Lakers or some shit." And I was like, "No fucking way, dude!" Like, and he's like, "Dude was just like sitting there rolling blunts and like kept passing them to me one right after the other." I'm like, "Motherfucker!" So like, I guess, but they have places like that, and you know, I know that eventually. They were just trying to get a jump on shit, you know, like it was going to come, but like, yeah, it was a little slow as it goes. But yeah, I think you'd see that with other drugs too, or, you know, at least other environments. Maybe you'd have like a camp for people that are doing like psychedelics or something, you know, it's like more like a outdoorsy environment. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I think in my head, all of these look like depending on the drug, I think they all probably look pretty different to like what we think of as like an alcohol bar. But yeah, I think that you could probably have plenty of tailored experiences for whatever the thing is. That would probably be better than you know, crashing on.
A lot of these drugs, like hookah lounge, just kind of knocks it in the head.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, then you know, if you're talking about stimulants, adult fucking McDonald's play places, bro.
Right there, you go.
We're talking jungle gyms. We're talking ball pits. Think about that. Trampolines.
Damn, you got me. You got me sold now. Yeah.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? I would run such a successful business.
Especially because they've taken all those out.
I got so much I could do right now. Look at all this stuff.
Be like, hey, I get some guy in there. He'd be like, "It's my first time, man. I'm a little sketchy about this. How do I need to go about this?" I'm like, "Well, let's start you out on the teeter-totter, my guy."
Yeah.
Let's get you over on the merry-go-round first, you know?
So, I think as far as the on-site consumption thing, I think it's just lagging behind because it takes, you know, you have to look through the liabilities, what you could be held liable for, and then, you know, much like the alcohol industry, the alcohol companies, they provide resources to the bar owners as far as, you know, lawyers and stuff like that if they need them. So I think it lagged behind a little bit just building that background infrastructure.
But you're signing a damn waiver before you come in fucking McWhalen's play place. I'll tell you that right now.
We're not responsible if you have heart conditions.
Yeah. If you have heart conditions, you kill your ankle or something, bro, that's on you. You knew coming into this that you were 41 years old and that your fucking ACLs were not up to this. So Jay Freak, I'm totally okay with you being an ambulance chaser and having a place right next door. It'll make things a lot easier. We'll just carry him over there.
A question from Jay Freak. It's a little more tame than the, you know, drugs we've been talking about tonight. But do you guys think that cigarettes should be more restricted?
I think cigarette makers should be held to a higher degree of accountability about what kind of shit they're putting in them. I just had this conversation earlier today, in fact.
Yeah, how about just tobacco and like not cancerous papers and, you know, like just regular tobacco, like not fucking sprayed with a bunch of bullshit, not super high nicotine tobacco or tobacco with a bunch of fucking additives in it, you know? I mean, I think that's where it's at, you know? I agree, like, a lot of these things that are really unhealthy for us that are already out there now are unhealthy because there is literally no regulation on how they're made and what the fuck goes into them, you know? And if there is, it's not nearly enough to really provide much safety for the consumer.
Like the other day we were talking about game stonks, bro. The SEC sitting on their hands. The regulatory bodies that should be looking at what's going into cigarettes are sitting on their fucking hands. They need to be holding these companies' feet to the fire a little bit and saying, "What are you putting in these things, man? What's keeping people so fucking hooked on this?" You know? I think that's a good question, but I think we're already moving toward that, Jay Freak. I mean,
didn't we just up
the age from 18 to 21 for buying cigarettes just a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean,
where are these things put?
And they've got ridiculously expensive. You know,
yeah, I think that's the way that they're gonna further restrict cigarettes. Is they're just gonna make, you know, economically unfeasible to continue to smoke at a certain point.
Hasn't that pretty much worked in like New York too? Isn't the level of smoker like real down there?
This is for my health and this is for money saving reasons.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
costs me less than half the amount of money to continue to get my nicotine with delicious fruity flavors than what it would cost me to smoke cigarettes. And then I also don't wake up coughing a bunch of nasty shit out of my lungs every morning.
Yeah, really ever. Yeah, no, I felt a million
psychedelic
times
art
better for
shows would
sure.
be the shit. Drew.
I don't know. It seems weird though because what weirdly happened, Jay Freak, like alternatively is like because like I got into vaping relatively early and it just started. I watched it get regulated on the fast track, and I like meanwhile cigarettes just like exist. Just cigarettes, fucking literally just nothing. Just an ellipses is all they say, and then like vape industry is just getting fucked.
Well, yeah, they're getting railed left and right now.
Yeah,
The vape industry.
Well, it's because they don't have a lot of extremely high profile lobbyists that are protecting them either.
I mean, true,
Well, yeah,
but
I mean, I think
crazy.
it kind of started with people dying, right? You know what I mean?
No, there were
a little
there were
string
like
of
the only death that ever came via vaping, and the regulations were hitting long before that. Were vaping around, as far as I'm aware, that like the big string of deaths was via people doing like shitty weed carts.
Mods.
Or no, it was like shitty. It was like shitty weed carts. It was
weed carts, right?
Yeah, they were cutting them instead of using a good emulsifier with vitamin E oil. Yeah, and it wasn't that it was like coating people's lungs. My buddy actually almost died from that.
Gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that shit was wild. But as far as like actual like nicotine vapes, the only thing that's ever been
mods, unregulated mods, where it was literally just like you had your coil and it was attached to a big fucking metal tube, and there was no like these have software in them that regulates what kind of voltage they're putting through and like throw up red flags when resistances are not in check where they should be, and like things are getting dangerous or batteries are not healthy or things like that. These mods were literally just like,
what up, Smite?
There's a contact.
Good to see
now
you,
we
man.
got a short, and it's firing this coil, and like
which even then
doing that, and it was blowing batteries up in their faces and hurting.
Even then, that's like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with an unregulated mod. You just got to know what the fuck you're doing. Like there's there's plenty of tube mods and shit that are dope that people can do just fine with. It's just a matter of like you definitely don't want to put like a pre-built coil on one of those or anything. Like they're way more likely to explode, or borderline guaranteed to vent your battery.
You're getting into like sub ohm and shit when you're doing shit like that. It gets a little sketchy.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, I mean, most of the, and then there was like, oh my god, I heard this argument.
Dicetyl, that's what I was about to say. Dicetyl was another one. But Dicetyl was never actually linked to people like vaping it. It was only like popcorn lung was like people who worked in a fucking factory that like made that butter all day, and Dicetyl was just they were like huffing nothing but like dicetyl fumes, and like that's what led to them having fucking popcorn lung. It wasn't like somebody just vaping some popcorn flavored shit.
And even then, now that's gone. The industry regulated that itself.
Yeah.
We got rid of that. They were like, okay, well, if that's dangerous, we'll stop putting it in the fucking vapes.
Even though, and it was never even shown to be dangerous in vapes. I mean, like, there's a big difference in like in everything and what it's being heated in the scale of how much is being like pumped into the air. The whole thing is different there. So I think they're pretty safe overall.
Here's another question from J Freak.
The last thing I would say on that, Blizza, is that even if 100 people had their faces blown off a year, the number of like heart disease and cancer that is linked to cigarettes now is already. I mean, like I'd take the fucking. I think the risk is probably fine.
Right.
Again,
no, I was just saying, I was just saying, the incendiary stories are what kind of drive
that bullshit.
Yeah.
Hysteria.
Yeah, that's true.
There's madness all over again.
Yep.
But we got off on a tangent about vapes. But looking here at J Freak has posed a question. He said, if weed was legalized, do you think lawmakers would do the same things, tax it until you can't get it? I don't think that's what's panning out in the places that it is legalized currently. I mean, you guys can speak more to that than I can. Jason, for sure.
So the reason that generally like cigarettes are taxed to death is because they're awful for the taxpayer and for insurance. Yeah. They fuck everybody. So like having a bunch of smokers in your state is really, really bad for you. There's going to be like some level of that with weed smoking. But even then, like there's so much more that you could do that doesn't require you to smoke anything into your lungs, that doesn't seem to have any negative benefits. Like, there, as far as I'm aware, there are literally no negative benefits linked to like edible
Like,
usage.
obviously, putting any sort of particulate into your lung is a bad thing.
Right. But so like
the severity is much less with weed than it is with cigarettes. That's just
Well, I think
facts.
controlling the supply actually has a lot to do with this. I mean, there really is no black market for tobacco products. You know what I mean? Besides knockoff vape pen cartridges,
Right.
But you know what I mean? Actual tobacco, there's really no black market, and that's kind of the reason why I don't think it would happen if they legalized weed, is because that the black market is there.
could you imagine if somebody
Yeah,
offered
right.
to sell you, they're like, you want to buy some patches me and my daddy made?
Right?
You're like,
You know
oh
what I mean?
God, what the fuck? No.
Like,
But
I'm
the black market
good.
for weed, I think, would keep the prices competitive. You know,
I grew up
like
growing
that's one of the
tobacco,
problems right now in where I'm at, is that the black market prices are still much more, they're much more attractive than the regulated prices, because you're not paying the 30% tax. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I mean, that's kind of the same here too. There are definitely people that are moving product, outside of the dispensary. But I've seen a lot of that product, and it's usually hyped up, or I've even seen them go to the dispensary and get specials and then turn around and sell it for regular prices. Like, you start to see enough of what they're actually doing, and it's like, okay, I can still go to the dispo and get this shit for cheaper.
Yeah, even
But
with the taxes.
it'll take a while for that to catch up with people, I think, is what it's going to be. Everybody's going to be like, oh, well, because I hear it all the time. I'm in a bunch of like groups. I actually did a vape judging for what we have out here called the Earl Cup. It's like a weed cup, but yeah, and
I'm sorry.
Fucking redolent, dude. Aaron just said,
my god, he got
I'm,
me
I'm
good.
assuming this is in a redneck accent. Redolent just said, my brother died from some knockoff American Spirit imitation cigarettes. So I've been advocating against the black market cigarettes so people can die from legit lung cancer like my daddy.
But
Oh
yeah,
my God.
the
So-
product doesn't seem to be any better than what they're getting at the dispensary. And like when you get down to nuts and bolts of it, it's not even a better deal, because you're having to use more of the product to get the same effect oftentimes. So
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: living in a state where it's still, black market. In 2017, I took a trip out to Colorado, and I went into a dispensary. And first off, it was just hilarious walking in there, coming from a state where it was illegal, because I was like, "What's that up there on the wall, man?" And he's like, "You don't have to whisper, bro." I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, all right, cool." So, but yeah, man, I went out there, like, going price for good quality marijuana here at the time was like $60 an eighth, and I went out there, and it's definitely gotten cheaper now, but I went out there and I bought 3/8 of way better weed for the same amount of money,
oh yeah,
with the taxes included. It was like $16 an eighth or something for shit that was like 28% or something, like way better weed than what I was getting.
I mean,
here.
I'll tell you exactly what it is here. Here it's an eighth is about $63 with the tax, but on the black market it's like $35 for the same weed, basically.
Oh.
yeah. See, the prices will go down eventually. Like they have here, like if you're buying an eighth for like more than $35-$40, it's got to be like some fucking bomb ass designer ass shit. Limited run, limited nug run type shit, like that's not going to be your everyday like purchase.
This is my daddy's custom strain. He's been
But-
working
but-
on for 40 years. It's called Blue Dream, Purple Nipples, Twist Dreams.
Even if it was like, even if it was somewhat more
I don't like
expensive though, if it were $65 an eighth compared to the 60 I was spending here, I would still probably prefer to buy from the dispensary, because it's probably going to be better shit, and it's like I'm not buying from some sketchy fucking dude. I'm not like knocking on an apartment at like 1 a.m. because that's when he got off work. Like there's no weirdness to it. It's just like I go in there at 3 p.m. and get my weed and leave.
Yeah, it is. It's straight up
Yeah.
like going to the convenience store. I even have my weed delivered a lot. I don't even go get it. Like they have like half the dispensaries will deliver it to your house.
And I'm a
So
consumer, baby. I want that cool looking packaging. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, and sometimes that is cool, you know. Like I love buying Cookies weed out here, man. Cookies
Yeah.
they got some good ass shit, man. Alien Labs got some good ass shit, you know. Like
This is actually a really good question. This one I really like.
Yeah. At a certain point, if it's universal, yes, it will.
So the question is, eventually, legalization will kill the black market, or do you think it will always be around? And I guess we could go whoever wants to jump on that.
I think eventually it will. If it reaches a point of universal legality, like all around the country, what's your fucking incentive to go buy it from some, black market guy?
Yeah, because like
just
right
go for
now.
it.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm good. That's all I'd say about it.
But yeah, I mean, like right now, I can only use where I'm at as an example and what I've seen out in LA and shit. But like, yeah, I mean, even now it's like you sure you can, but nobody really wants to. Like nobody really wants to go to the plug anymore. At least when I get down to brass tacks talking to people. So I think eventually it's going to kind of go by the wayside, especially when it gets to the point where there's no profit incentive for them. Because what's going to happen is as it gets broader spread, as we see more and more of these dispensaries and more of these grow ops, the price is going to go down. There's going to be more supply of it. So just sheer by the supply and demand factor of everything, the bottom's going to drop out in the black market because who the fuck's going to want to like do that? At that point you're not making enough to do anything. Like even if you are trying to grow on the super cheap, it's not worth it. Weed's already not hardly worth selling anyways. Like there's not a lot of profit in selling weed. At least I never found that there was. It's very marginal.
Yeah, even most black market, like small time black market dealers right now, unless it's a fucking cartel or something, they're literally just selling to supply their own, like,
yeah,
smoking.
Yeah,
Then-
enough to have their own weed.
Smoke for free.
Follow-up question: if it does get rid of the black market, then what's to stop the government from taxing it, like in much the same way that they
Fucking
are
these
cigarettes
hands
now?
right here, UPS next day. What I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that I just think that
Voting
like
power.
I think the health
Yeah.
risks are so much lower. I mean, like if we look at the way that like alcohol is pretty intentionally kept affordable from the taxation standpoint because they make a fuckload of money on it. I think that it's more likely to fall into like the confines of that, but potentially even better because there's way less liability involved in pretty much every asset of weed.
Yeah, alcohol is actually a pretty good comparison. I didn't think of that. Thanks.
Yeah.
There you go, Waylon.
Hey, freak. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh
man.
damn! My bad, Jay. Yeah, what I said there was basically that that I think that we would treat it more like alcohol than cigarettes. Is that like we would probably keep it intentionally affordable so that they can continue to make money. We got a question here from one Mike Lightyear. If anybody knows who that is, it says, "Is Jason jealous of Prime Kai's fresh cut?"
So jealous. Hardcore jealous of the fresh cut.
Eating you alive right now.
What's that?
Like, it's difficult to keep your mind on the topic at hand, right?
I know,
Sure.
because that fresh cut's like, it's living rent free in my head right now.
We've probably got time for like one more solid question if anybody wants to throw one into either chat, and then we'll go into outros, and then are you streaming for a while tonight, Jason?
Yeah, I'll be on for a while.
And also just take a moment to say thank you, Jay Freak. I really appreciate that, man. Worked fucking hard on that shit. And so thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we wanted to put some more laid back acoustic type shit on there because we enjoy stuff like that too. It's just what we usually write ends up coming out a little more aggressive. But I appreciate that, man. It really means a lot to me that you took the time to listen to it and that you actually enjoyed it. So thank you.
Getting our shout out links ready real quick. So I guess we'll go ahead and just go into into kind of like takeaways, where we think maybe this conversation should go from here. Anything that you think would probably, kind of help manifest the things that we talk about, like actually happening, or etc. Any of your takeaways, and then we'll go. We haven't done a Blizza first yet, so Blizza, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what, if anything we've talked about has changed your stance on any of this, or given you a stance even.
Well, yeah, I think that we found some clarity in a gray area that I was thinking. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm more informed on what you're actually advocating for when you say legalize drugs or decriminalize drugs, which is, I mean, that's huge. It's the first step to actually having a conversation, is gaining some clarity. First, I'd want to say thank you, Jason, for coming on. I really appreciated hearing your point of view, and I appreciate you getting personal in some of the stories that you relayed to the world. That's fucking awesome, dude. I appreciate it. But yeah, I think we should still do what we can to disincentivize destructive behavior. We should focus on the root problems of the addictions. I think there are further conversations to be had here. Like I said,
absolutely, you can't
go
unpack this in 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, in the healthcare field, I think is one conversation that's needed, and then also in the criminal justice and reform of both of those fields, a lot of headway can be done, and some lives can be saved, I believe. So I appreciate you guys having this talk. It was a good one.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. And then Waylon.
Yeah, my takeaway, I didn't really do much changing on this one, but it was nice to kind of talk through my stances on it, because it's been a long time since I've had a conversation with somebody that was either ambivalent about it or had some opposing viewpoints. So it was nice for me to get to experience that, and then to talk with Jason as well, and get some insight into what, what it looks like on the other end of that, for at least one drug. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. So Jason, I appreciate you coming on, man. Again, I'm Waylon, MK Ultra 7 here on Twitch. Play guitar in a progressive rock band also, and I always plug that because that's just what I do. It's shameless self-promotion. Feel free to check out anything I've got going on, and follow along. Hang out with me.
Awesome. And then Jason, if you want to go ahead.
All right. I am Jason Society. You can find me at Jason_Society on Twitch, or Jason Society, one word, on Twitter. I like to stream about cannabis, politics, a lot of music, and really enjoyed actually the opportunity to sit down with the Bearded Rationals and have this conversation today. You guys are awesome. I'd say the biggest takeaway I can see is that I think that there is an underlying idealism about how this can work as far as what decriminalization looks like, that we were able to come to a big consensus on it. At least I saw that quite a bit with Waylon, and 10 flicks to that end. But like, it seems to me like a lot of people who are advocating for this really do have an understanding of what it is that they want to see with it, and it's pretty similar or pretty close in a lot of ways. And I think that's a good thing. I do think that sometimes sloganeering, like just decriminalize all drugs, that powerful of a statement can scare people off. But I think just like if you then turn around and go have the one-on-one like we did with Blizza today, we can find some consensus on some of that and reach some middle ground.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty, that's what it's all about. That's one of the things that like we if you listen to every episode, you've heard me like harp on this, but I know that you've got people listening, so like that's one of the things that we're kind of striving to do here is provide an alternate platform to like all the blood sports stuff, to where you can actually maybe more reasonably find that consensus and actually hash these discussions out to a you know, to a degree that isn't about the dunk. That's more about, you know, let's see where we're at the end of the conversation. So yeah, I also would like to thank you for coming on. You've been a really cool guest. I think this has been a really cool episode. At some point we should have you back on. We'll talk maybe more a music focused topic, or you know, or something like that. I'm sure that you and Waylon could probably go back and forth on that for a while.
For sure.
You
We'd
better
be happy
hash
to
out
do
a
it.
4-hour slot for that bitch.
Yeah, right.
Let's do it.
But everybody else who stopped in, I super appreciate it. If you want to drop a follow on the channel, or I dropped everybody's links, make sure, even if you don't follow this channel and you lurk the whole time, go follow our guest Jason. He's been super cool, and he hopped up and you know, was super down to get a topic worked out on like a couple days notice. So definitely toss him the follow.
Likewise with my guys, go follow these guys. It's 10 Flicks and MK Ultra 7, Blizza 81. So give them a follow too. Like they said, we might be doing this again, so definitely want to stay up to date with what they're doing, and I'm going to be watching too. I'm going to be watching the episodes as well. I'm excited to see what you guys put out.
Awesome. Well, we super appreciate that. The
Jenkins a myth.
the only thing left to do is we're gonna go ahead and we'll raid our viewers into you, Jason, since you've been nice enough to come on. There's an underscore in your Twitch one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody's
All
talking
right.
shit.
Everybody else, thank you for stopping by. Like I said, I appreciate all the follows. Everybody who stopped in to watch. J Freak, I appreciate you a ton for your questions as always. And yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Prime one.
This raid is taking way longer than I thought it would.
Oh, I hate it when that happens. You're like,
What's this bitch out? I got more Jenkum shit to talk about. I'm chomping at the fucking bit here. I feel like we didn't talk about Jenkum nearly enough.
there you go. All right, you guys rated in. It looks good. Again, thank you guys, all you 10 Flicks folks, for coming through. Appreciate having you guys. We're going to get into some other stuff here in just a minute. And just again, thanks again, guys, for everything. Appreciate you all, and hope you all have a good night.
You too, man. Take her easy.
Thanks again, buddy.
All right. Yeah.